Thank you for listening to the Supply Chain Doctor Show, where we strive to bring you new ideas from thought leaders and new solution concepts that may not be on your radar today. Today, I'm fortunate to be with Tom Brouillette, a friend and a supply chain futurist, and a principal with Otis Supply Chain Consulting. You can find more about Tom by following him on LinkedIn and watching some of his interviews he does frequently on YouTube. But for now, let's learn more about Tom and his journey to what I've recently saw him talk about, anti-fragility. Tom, thanks for investing time with me today.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here. I'm glad that I'm excited to be on your show. I know I've watched your videos, your program for a while, and I finally graduated into the big leagues when you invited me, I think.
Sure. Well, you're a thought leader, and that's what we're trying to do is give people a platform to share their ideas and give audiences a chance to hear what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back a little bit, Tom. What were your formative years? Where'd you go to college? Where'd you grow up? Those type of things.
I grew up in the Chicagoland area. Actually started working pretty much right out of high school, and I obtained a degree online courses. So it worked out very well for me. And I spent my early years in working for Sears Roebuck and Spiegel Catalog, of course, from being in Chicago, in the technology aspect of things. And I really kind of gravitated towards supply chain as a result of some of the work that I was doing at Spiegel Catalog. And it just interested me a lot. It clicked. I enjoyed doing it. And, the rest, as they say, is history. I spent some time in a lot of different retailers from Sears and Spiegel. Eddie Bauer was also a part of Spiegel at that time. And then I went to the TV retailers for QVC, which was rather interesting. And then shortly after that, I got involved in, at the time, it was New Breed Logistics, and it was acquired by XPO Logistics as one of their first contract logistics acquisitions. And I was with them for quite a while, I think about 12 years. And that's when I really got into adding new customers, supporting new customers, onboarding, things of that nature. And it was just, it all kind of resonated with me. And I learned an awful lot about an awful lot of different industries, from aerospace and defense to government, the postal service, to food. Weight Watchers was one of my customers, and retail. I did some work on Nike, and also the other food was chocolates. So, a wide variety of experiences, and I was lucky to be with a company like XPO that had that customer base to give you that variety, and that kind of teed me up for another interest in supply chain. I started off focused on supply chain visibility, and shortly later realized that the visibility doesn't mean anything if you can't do anything with it. You have to see it, you have to be able to analyze it in order to do something with it. And then the next step is the AI side and agentic AI. And that's how I got into the anti-fragile supply chain. I define the anti-fragile supply chain as a logistics supply network that can excel in disruption, not just be able to identify it, not just determine how to do things with it, but to automate the reaction to it. You create a supply chain that can sense and respond to disruption. I saw an interesting statistic, Chris, that was the average 100-year disaster, storm, whatever it might be, is now occurring roughly every 24 months.
So the black swan events that used to be once every 10 years, you're saying now is about every 2 years.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I'm glad you brought up black swan, because one of the things that I noticed recently is, or I realized is, you never hear anybody talk about black swans anymore.
It's more of a routine occurrence now because
It is.
it's
It is.
part of operations, I would assume. Risk.
Right. And it's anything, it's easy. You can't, you have to take everything into consideration because it's anything from an, an ocean freight vessel getting twisted around in the Suez Canal to a war in the Middle East to a tsunami in off of Japan to major hurricanes throughout and tornadoes throughout the United States and other countries. And also the 800-pound gorilla is the pandemic. So there's so many different things that come into account. And when I started looking at it, the fascinating thing is that it's not just one that happens. It's one leads into another, leads into another. And so that's the reason for the ability to respond to a disruption.
What's interesting, Tom, is from a memory standpoint, my memory, before the events they were spread out. And
Mm-hmm.
I could remember them as discrete events. Now you were talking about the tsunami and the Suez Canal. I've almost forgotten about those because as soon as they're fixed, or as soon as they're whatever non-disruptive, the next one comes along. So you tend to forget about them more frequently. That's what I just
Yeah,
realized.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And the thing that I noticed was that we went from a time during the pandemic when the industry was talking about rebuilding the supply chain and rebuilding your supplier network to limit the impact of any one supplier having a problem. The thing that I noticed was that after a couple of years, the companies in the industry started to fall back on their old ways, started to fall back into how do I squeeze savings out of my supply chain? And so my biggest concern was that these organizations would just go back to the lowest cost provider, which is really what causes a brittle supply chain is lowest cost. In our desire to reduce cost and focus on cost reductions, we built a supply chain with only the lowest cost providers, and we eliminated all the other suppliers and providers out of that model because they were not the lowest cost. And what we started to realize is in order to be able to respond, you have to be able to move or use suppliers from different geographic areas. If the Suez Canal goes down, you don't want to have to go all the way around to Cape of Good Hope in Africa to get to Europe from China. So you find all of these things going on. There's an interesting point that I ran across that we do have a big challenge right now with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. The interesting thing is that the Saudi Arabia thought about that at one point in time and built a rail line that allows them to move their oil away from the Strait of Hormuz and ship it by rail to a port in the Red Sea. The problem with that is that it doesn't have enough capacity or volume to be able to support to eliminate the ocean vessels. So you're seeing all of these things going on, and that's really what you need to do. There is not a one size fits all. And that's why it's so important to really utilize and incorporate the power of the artificial intelligence solution. And it's more being able to execute queries and scenarios than anything else.
It's interesting, Tom. You mentioned this a few minutes ago. The lowest cost supply chain or lowest cost provider
Mm-hmm.
creates a brittle supply chain. That was one of my aha moments coming out of the pandemic.
Yep.
As everybody said, the supply chains are broken. You remember as a supply chain
Hmm.
person, nobody knew what you did for 30 years until the pandemic. They couldn't get toilet paper, right? Then everybody
Yeah,
knew what to
exactly.
get. Well, the challenge was, and I heard another guest talk about this on a podcast, was that the supply chain wasn't broken. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was back then just in time, low cost provider.
Right.
And when things shifted, the supply chain couldn't adapt as quickly. So I struck
Hmm.
on that as well. So lowest cost can often create brittleness in the supply chain. That's good.
Yeah,
Key
yeah.
takeaway for me right there.
The funny thing is, here's the interesting thing that dawned on me, because I've been around for quite a while, and I was when I was at Spiegel, we started using EDI to track to um, for purchasing and tracking the quality of the product the suppliers are giving to us. And one of the big points at that point in time, and this is in the 80s, early 90s, was that that's when the globalization first started building up steam. And at that point, the generally accepted process was to utilize Asian suppliers and factories for the bulk of the order. So you might order 70%, even 80% of your volume that you're going to use within the season from the foreign supplier, because it takes 3 to 6 months to get the product. But you would start the beginning of the season, the new product life cycle domestically, and any fluctuations over the forecast you would fill with the domestic suppliers because you couldn't, it took too long. So that eventually got eliminated to the just in time lowest cost provider, decimated all of the manufacturing in the United States, or a majority of the manufacturing, I should say, and really pushed the industry into this brittle configuration.
You're the man of words. I read what your posts on LinkedIn, your Substacks. So you've just brought another one, brittle supply chain. You got anti-fragile supply chain.
Right?
Heard you talk about when we talked about the continuous disruptions, which was the black swan events becoming. I guess we'll have to come up with a new name for that. Uh,
Yeah.
a supply chain mesh. I've heard you talk about that. Monoliths.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is it? Earn and burn, or
Earn
earn,
as you burn.
earn as you burn. So these are a lot of great concepts that I think you're full of. So how did you come up with these ideas? I mean, what was the motivator behind that? I know, just so the audience knows, you and I did some work at a company where the concept was digital supply chain network.
Mm-hmm.
Did that have any influence on the way you think today?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It kind of piqued my interest and kind of opened my eyes to see things in a different way. I've been thinking since the pandemic that we really need to come up with a new term for supply chain, because supply chain implies an end-to-end, point-to-point process, right? Supplier, carrier, shipper, all of that, it's just one point after the other. When in reality, we have to look at this as a more of the network concept, thinking of it, I think of it as a social network concept where I can contact anybody in the network directly without going through other people. But the important thing here is one thing leads to another. And as I'm thinking and going through developing white papers, it dawned on me that rather than a network, a mesh is more descriptive,
Mesh.
because there's so many different factors in play that it kind of fluctuates. And I remember seeing these diagrams, these pictures of supply and demand and everything on a mesh, and it would kind of float around and kind of bulge and contract, expand and contract along the way, depending on what was happening. And that really kind of clicked. The earn as you burn is a great, I love that because it really catches your attention, but more than that, it really describes what it is. The point is, um, you know, here's something interesting. My question that now that I'm obsessed with is how can you develop an anti-fragile supply chain by implementing a 3-year Big Bang transformation? It doesn't make sense to me,
Yeah,
you know. And the other point, so that's where I come up with the earn as you burn, and really what it is it's smashing together a couple of concepts, right? It takes the agile framework where you're doing a series of releases as you go along. You're figuring it out. You're not so much figuring it out on the way, you're getting into the details along with the delivering value. Because to me, there's nothing more important than delivering value. I don't even want to talk about it unless there's some sort of value delivered. And that's kind of that's really the supply chain and logistics methodology really kind of
sure.
ingrained in your psyche, you know. But the point of the matter is, I've seen things about quantum quantum theory, and the thing that always caught my attention is to start thinking about things having three states. And the simplest way to think of it is I have three states, and you don't know what the state of me is until you open up. I'm in a box, you open up the box and you look at it. So just the fact that you're looking at something has a tendency, it can change the state of the actual thing it's looking at. So you have either, the three states are basically alive, dead, and neither alive nor dead. So, and I get a little bit more,
Undead or
yeah, undead, and I get a
unalive.
little
I don't know
bit
which one.
more, not so much graphic, but more literal or a picture by thinking of it as a cat in a box. You don't know the state of the cat in the
Right.
box until you open the box and look at it, right?
Right.
So if you take that idea and get into the agile and utilize the agile framework and process of releases, regular releases, you come up with, I came up, that's how I came up with the earn as you burn. You're looking at a 90-day cycle to deliver value, and the goal is to pay for the next release out of the ROI from the previous release. The beauty of a release cycle is I can immediately, after implementation, measure the results against the original objectives. And so, getting back to the concept of the three states, right? I thought it would look good. I had a saying, I had a saying during a go live where, well, everything looked great on a piece of paper, and then we put it into reality and it all went to hell. So that concept, am I getting the value I anticipated? What can I do to adjust? What is changing? But it gives you that opportunity to continuously revise and improve. That's the point.
You've got so many ideas floating around in your head, Tom. As we ramp down, I look forward to learning more about these. But back just a couple of points. You talked about we need a. It's not really supply chain management. It's more supplier network.
Yep.
And I'm going to plug a previous interview I did with Dr. Doug Lambert. He's a pioneer in supply chains, and he talked about how it's moving towards the most competitive supply chain networks. So I
Hmm.
thought that was interesting. I'll refer people to that as well.
Yeah.
You talked about the dead cat in the box. That reminded me of the Big Bang Theory. I know it came before that, but when they talked about what was it, Rodinger's cat or something like that, that was one.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I can't remember what it is, but a good lesson. And then I always think about when people say they've got a plan, but it never works, or it works until you. As Mike Tyson, he's credited for saying everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So
Yep. Exactly.
similar ideas. So would you be open to, I know you're a prolific writer. You've got a lot of ideas. I can see the ideas flowing out of your ears right now as we talk. Could we come back on future sessions and take deeper dives into some of these
Oh,
concepts that
absolutely.
you're talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I, you know, what you find, what I've discovered is the simple act of thinking about something has a tendency to generate new ideas,
That's
you
true.
know. So it's very helpful in this. And I guess you could say it's a goal or a mission of mine to really try to change. I would like nothing better than to be the one that that pushed for the change or realized the change from supply chain to supply network.
Yeah, we could do it. We could do it. That's a branding exercise, and unfortunately, it's branded across the world, so it's
Yeah,
making it
exactly.
easier to change. But that's something we could strive for, and we could start here. So we'll come back on future shows, and we'll kind of air out some of that content in your head. So I appreciate that, and I'll give everybody. But I want to thank everyone for investing a part of your day, listening to the Supply Chain Doctor, again, where we strive to bring you new ideas, which Tom has already started, at least in my mind, and from thought leaders, and then and also new solution concepts that you may not be on your radar. That's something I strive to do as well. But I'm Chris Barnes, the Supply Chain Doctor. When I'm not doing podcasts, I focus on improving warehouse operations and performance. So I like to tell people I'm saving the world one warehouse at a time. So please like and subscribe and contact me direct with ideas for future shows. And if you ever need any help improving your warehouse operations, please give me a shout. We'll talk soon. Thank you.